values were created by sages and by people that were very introspective. It's not that they invented them, they just discovered them. Namaskar. Yama and Yama. So in yoga, in Ashtanga Yoga, which was put together by Patanjali, he lived around the time of Christ. He wrote down some yogic scriptures and he recorded the Ashtanga Yoga, which means the yoga of the 8 limbs, to achieve samadhi or go into this trance state. He made 8 steps. The 2 first steps are Yama and Yama. So Yama and Yama are basically the 10 yogic principles. They are very important to keep control over your mind and to relate to the outside world as well. The difference between ethics and moral principles is that ethical principles are for oneself. So within you, you see what's good or bad, and that's your ethics. And then there's moral principles, which is related to the society and the environment that you're in. And these are defined by society. What I'm gonna present next is the Yamas and Yamas, which in my opinion are both ethical and moral principles. As humans, we live in this world, and so in dealing with other humans, we need some guidelines to interact, because not everyone is aware of good or bad. And in my opinion also, one big lack in today's society is these values, is what we value. I think we have a big value crisis in the sense that there's a lot of materialism, for example, and valuing money a lot, for example. I do think that if we could all come together as one human society and establish some values for everyone, this would be very helpful in the planet. And so these values were created by sages and by people that were very introspective. It's not that they invented them, they just discovered them. And this is also an invitation to see if it resonates with you and to see if it makes sense for you. And if it does, I also invite you to contemplate on them every day and think about them often. So without further ado, let's go into the first. So there are 10 principles, and the first point is Yamas. Yama means to have control. So these are points to have self-restraint and to have them in mind is more the things that we should be attentive for. This is a very widely known one, so ahimsa. Himsa means violence, and ahimsa means non-violence. So not to inflict pain or hurt anybody by thought, word or action is ahimsa. These are guidelines, and this is something that we strive for, and we come back to this through our lives. It's not something that you read now and then, okay, yes, I'm not going to inflict pain on anyone by thought, word or deed for sure from now on. No, it's not something like that. You contemplate on it, and then the more you think about it, the more you contemplate about it, the more you integrate it as well. So this is an extension from the normal one, because usually it's just not to inflict pain or hurt anybody by word or action, but here is also thought. So you have to have the intention to hurt someone, to be breaking ahimsa. So for example, if you're defending yourself, it's okay, it's not violence. We were talking yesterday about hurting plants, picking off weeds and things like this. We can see it with violence, but the intention that you put in is not of violence, is of you're taking care of something else. So it's more with this intention of non-harming and that it has to come through. But it does not mean that you cannot defend yourself. And it does not mean that you cannot protect others as well from oppressive forces. If you're defending your life, I don't think is breaking non-violence. It's about the intention. It's not about harming the other. It's about defending or protecting something. In actions, words and thoughts. So insulting someone or also having bad thoughts about someone. It's breaking ahimsa. And this part is very interesting, because for me, I also have these dark thoughts in myself. But it's not about not having them, it's about transmuting these thoughts. So you notice you have them, and you accept, and then you think good about this person. Also, one tip in yoga is to take the opposite stance. So when you're thinking bad thoughts about someone, you do good things for them. So your mind changes, your opinion changes, or you give things to that person. Yeah, and also to yourself. Very important. Non-violence to yourself. This is Satya. The benevolent use of mind and words is Satya. So usually Satya is translated as truth, but in Ananda Marga there's a different opinion, in the sense that there are facts, and then there is benevolent truth. There is Rita in Sanskrit and Satya. So facts just means that you just tell bluntly what you feel and what you're thinking, or you can call it radical honesty. Yeah, in a way that if someone has like a funny nose, you tell them, "Oh, you have a funny nose." This would be you're telling the truth, but it's kind of harming the other person. And this principle usually is translated as just telling the truth. But there's a deep meaning of Satya, which is the benevolent. So you contemplate if what you're about to say is gonna hurt the other person as well. So it's also related with ahimsa. You also think of others goodly. So instead of thinking negative thoughts, you transmute them and you think positive things about it. So there's this example of imagine you're in your school, you saw a kid running and hiding, and then there are some aggressors that came to you and asked like, "Oh, where did that person run?" According to truth, if you would tell the truth, you tell, "Oh, we just ran over there." And then these bullies would go and maybe beat him or something. But instead, in the use of Satya, in this case, you can lie or not tell the complete truth in order to protect the person that's running away. So this is pretty straightforward, is Ashtanga. To renounce the desire to acquire or retain the wealth of others is Ashtanga. It has also a slight difference here to the common interpretation, because usually it's just non-stealing, and this is just like to renounce taking things from others. But here is also to renounce the desire to acquire things from others or to keep others from having them. So this is also related to wealth accumulation and having enough and not giving. In yoga, and mostly in Tantra yoga, it's about transmuting these desires. So it's not about not having them. I don't know if you know that movie, The Clockwork Orange. So there's this person that has this tendency of violence, and then he's treated in a way that he still has this tendency of violence, but he cannot do because he was treated badly for doing it. But he still has a desire to do it. It's not about having the desire not doing it, it's mostly about just transmuting that desire, just not having it anymore. And for that also we have a great help of Ananda Marga's second lesson, the Guru Mantra, which helps to transmute. You can also take that ideation that it's mostly about taking the cosmic ideation that everything is part of that, an expression of that supreme consciousness. And talking about supreme consciousness, there's next brahmacharya, which is actually what I just said. To keep the mind always absorbed in Brahma. Commonly brahmacharya is translated as celibacy actually, and even monks are called usually brahmacharis. But in Ananda Marga, it's not accepted, this translation. Brahmacharya just means keeping your mind in the thought of that divine, in the thought of this is all inside. This is all a dream in the cosmic mind. This is all inside that supreme consciousness. And it's to keep that constant flow, that constant ideation, that everything is part of the supreme consciousness. And this, out of the 5 jamas, this is what we consider the most important one. And the next one, aparigraha, or as we mostly common know it nowadays, minimalism. and is to renounce everything except the necessities for the maintenance of the body. So it's mostly about non-luxury things, about not having superfluous things that you don't need. So before buying things, before taking things, really ask yourself like if you really need it, if you're gonna really use it. So the jamas that I just presented, they are mostly about this aspect of contemplation in yourself, these questions that you keep in your mind. While the niyamas that will come next are mostly about doing things in your environment.